can I ask you? I want to ask you guys something real fast. So Alex Jones, with the Sandy Hook situation, being sued, he's filing. Sounds like he's filing for bankruptcy, Chapter 11. He's doing that to protect himself against these lawsuits, right?
Well, what happened is I can talk about it to a degree because I represented Alex and InfoWars during different stages of these cases. What happened is the plaintiffs deliberately sued a bunch of entities that they knew at least at certain points that had no assets. So they sue Alex, they sue Owen, they sue Free Speech Systems, which is the main InfoWars company, and then they sue every company that has the name InfoWars on it, right?
Well,
they sued Alex has.
They sued IW.
Yeah, they've sued Owen. They've sued Owen. These courts have issued default judgments against Owen for something they claim Alex didn't do. And by the way, what does this tell you? He gets a default judgment on the grounds that he didn't share financial information. And yet all this financial information is in all these plaintiff suits. So, I mean, these courts just lied. They just fabricated the law, fabricated the facts to railroad Alex Jones because they don't like Alex Jones. And what's happening in Austin courts is a disgrace. What's happening in the Connecticut courts is a disgrace. These judges are a disgrace. It's just the reality of it. I mean, he's getting sanctioned for sitting for a fourth or fifth deposition in a case he's not allowed to defend himself at trial, when normally you only get 1 day of deposition period in any case. So, I mean, the degree of discrepancy in these courts' conduct is extraordinary. You will find consistently that when the courts are sanctioning parties, 9 times out of 10, it's the politically disfavored party. It has nothing to do with the law or the facts. That's the reality of it. But so the plaintiffs sue all of these they sue Owen, they sue who also had default judgments issued against him, even though he had nothing to do with what they claimed was the problem. So it shows you how these courts are completely fraudulent, not serious. But they sue all these affiliate entities. So he's got all these affiliate entities, which, as described in the bankruptcy, don't have any assets. And so the plaintiffs should have dismissed it. But they refused to dismiss him because they want to make his life miserable, because they want to wage lawfare against him. So so they knew from the get-go, because I had told them, if you leave these entities in, at some point, these entities have to file bankruptcy to protect what their function. But they refused. They're like, they wanted him to have to file bankruptcy for those entities. He himself has not filed personal bankruptcy.
So is InfoWars the entity that has filed bankruptcy? Yes,
exactly. The InfoWars system, InfoWars, all that is outside of this.
Okay.
It's just these affiliates that serve little technical roles. So they're just making life miserable for him, and he has to file bankruptcy in order to protect the limited role those entities play.
One of them was Prison Planet TV. The other one was IW Health, which I thought maybe that was one of the supplement businesses.
It didn't serve any purpose. It's just a name. There's nothing in it.
But now, Robert, they're going. The plaintiffs are going to petition the court to suspend the stay of proceedings.
Well, what they should do is dismiss the chart. What they should have done from day one, 2 years ago, dismiss those other. But they refuse. They want to play games. They just want to make his life, because they don't care about recovery for none of these people, even to my knowledge, at least almost none of them, wrote a single letter complaining about Alex for 6 years, right? So they were so emotional. And what it is we're supposed to sit back and not talk about them because they had a horrible tragedy happen to them. At some point, you don't get to stand on the coffin of your dead kid to politically grandstand and violate the constitutional rights of others. Sorry, I run out of patience. These people, a lot of them, are just scammers. They're just scam artists. They didn't complain about a single thing Alex Jones said for more than 6 years. And then all of a sudden they have a complaint? No, they're just money grabbers and political harassers. That's who they are. That's what they are. Nobody wants to say it because they're like, oh, man, they had a tragedy happen to them. You can't question them. You can't criticize them. They're the second coming of Jesus. They're not. They're fraudsters, scam artists, and political harassers who want to violate constitutional rights and liberties to line their pockets with even more money, because a lot of them got millions and millions and millions from other places. And we're just supposed to, and I'm just tired of being generous about it. I'm sorry they suffered a horrible tragedy. That doesn't give you the right to violate other people's rights. That doesn't give you the right to be a scam artist and a fraudster and a cheat. To pretend that you were deeply emotionally harmed when you didn't even write a letter of complaint for 6 years. You didn't write a letter of complaint, but you were so bothered by Alex Jones, you couldn't even bother to write an email. Come on.
Robert,
that's my rant.
Well, and they did, from what I understood, someone just said Barnes is furious. I can't even get that chat anymore. It's gone. Jones offered to the plaintiffs, like it was 150,000 each per plaintiff once upon a time, or not relatively recently.
Well, I don't know what's public and what's not public, but
okay, so
from the get, like there's this false story. I mean, the other thing about this that's totally false. People can go back and see what Alex Jones said on the night of Sandy Hook. He didn't say it didn't happen. He said it did happen. He just said, you know what the culprits are? They're not going to blame. They're not going to blame Hollywood culture. They're not going to blame the big pharmacy industries that is drugging up these kids with side effects of SSRIs. They're not going to blame the school system that didn't have adequate security and safety. Instead, they're going to blame the gun, because they're going to use this as an excuse to take away people's right of self-defense, which is what the Second Amendment fundamentally is. It protects the most effective means of self-defense, but it's self-defense that it protects. And that's precisely what happened. Barack Obama, Piers Morgan said, I'm going to stand on the graves of these dead kids for my political purpose. How is that a good, moral, righteous act? There's nothing about that that's moral and righteous. And that's what they did. And months into the process, a bunch of other people, including professors of media, professors that are related to people who are school safety experts, professors of philosophy, came to their own conclusion, raising questions about what happened. And here's the reality of what happened. The school system didn't have basic safety mechanisms. I mean, since Columbine, you're supposed to be able to lock the inside of the door to protect kids. They didn't even spend the money for that because the politicians were busy pocketing it for other projects. But they were hiding that. And so people that are using FOIA requests are seeing the politicians are hiding, and they assume they're hiding something worse and more nefarious. It turned out they were just hiding their own corruption that was complicit in the primary reason so many people died that day. But instead of blame those people, which, by the way, the Connecticut courts have rushed in to cover up and hush up and hide and immunize, they blame Alex Jones, who they have 7 words out of 7 million, 7 minutes of words out of 7 million plus minutes of words he'd said over the 7+ years, and that InfoWars had spread. That's what they're talking about, where he raised questions about it years later. That's it. I mean, to blame him for Sandy Hook is absurd. And the fact that so many people are doing it is absurd. And these plaintiffs are not serious plaintiffs. Almost none of them complained one single time in 7 years. They just said, let's sue, let's line our pockets, let's make a political statement. And they think you can't criticize them because they suffered tragedy. Suffering tragedy is not immunity for bad acts. And the reality is Jones is being wrongly accused. He's being railroaded by a corrupt justice system that cannot do its job because his name is Alex Jones.
Yeah, they got to shut him down. This
absolutely, it's lawfare meant. This is a guy who had not been sued in 25 years of business. Donald Trump wins, and he gets sued more than 24 times in 12 months. Not just related to these cases. All of a sudden, they're trolling through every photo he's ever published. They're trolling through every video he's ever done. They're trolling through every statement he's ever made. And ask yourself, who's been more right than anybody over the last 2 years? Who was the only guy predicting that they were going to do something like this with a pandemic as a power grab? Who was the only guy predicting that the deep state activity was up to what we have witnessed it be up to in Russiagate and Spygate and Ukrainegate and in the Hunter Biden laptop related issues? It's this guy. I mean, and they try to take him out because they've had this agenda. They try to take him out because he helped Trump get elected, and they wage lawfare against him. And you had huge corporate law firms representing the original Pepe maker for free to go after Alex Jones. And of course, it turned out, he had certain intentions with that Pepe thing that were separate than what it was all about. And taking credit for creating Pepe is still, it is a frog, folks. It's a frog. I mean, how original is it, right? You know what I mean? I like the frog, but it's still a frog. But that it was pure war, pure legal warfare. And they're forcing him to take these defensive postures just to keep his business afloat and to protect its ongoing operational basis. But they're not going to sink Alex Jones. They're not going to defeat Alex Jones. They're not going to crush Alex Jones. The irony in all this, he probably would have retired after 2016. But when you decide to wage war on him, he's not going to go gently into that good night because that's not who he is. He's going to rage and rage against the dying of the light, as he should and as we should.
Well, Salty, that was the answer to the question.
Yeah, that was a Salty inspired rant.
That's awesome.